This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Joining us today is Tristan Pottas, the CEO of First Development Resources. Hi Tristan, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks Mark, and really pleased to be talking to you today from the Selta project here in the Northern Territory.
Yes, you're on site at the Selta project in the Northern Territory, and this is FDR's Uranium and Rare Earth project. How long have you been on site, and what are your first impressions?
Yeah, so we had a brief ride up yesterday into the general area, but today's been the first full morning on site. And I've got to say, first impressions have been excellent. You know, considering it's a reconnaissance trip, we've arrived, and the first thing we've got is supportive landowners, very helpful. Secondly, incredible access, and I aren't overstating that. We were able to drive straight onto Selta along well-maintained tracks, which is fantastic. And then on arrival, we've seen some really interesting outcrop, which has obviously given us a lot of encouragement for the remaining days that we are on site, and obviously for the follow-up sampling work, which we'll do at a later date.
Okay, now FDR recently undertook an in-depth review of all publicly available geological, geophysical and geochemical data for the project. Have you found this review has benefited the planned works on site, and what have been the main activities you're undertaking?
So yeah, absolutely. The data review was imperative in order for us to actually progress in our typically methodical, structured fashion. You know, prior to the data review being completed, we had a really good idea. There were some interesting targets based on neurology and some of the higher level geological interpretation that had been done previously. However, the data review has really compiled all that historical data, and there was a fair amount of it. And on the back of that, for those who've seen the report, you'll have seen that the author identified 4 prospective uranium targets and also 3 separate rare earth element targets, along with other chances of mineralization as well. So, without question, really helpful, and it's allowed us to really home in on these targets on what is actually a pretty large project area.
Okay, and in addition to the uranium and rare earth element mineralization, the review also identified the potential for lithium, gold and base metal mineralization, as well as the possibility for tin, tantalum and tungsten-rich pegmatites. What are the next stages of exploration for these newly identified targets, and have you managed to spend any time on site looking at these areas?
So, I mean, when you run through the list of potential minerals for site, you know, it's almost like a smorgasbord of possibility. Now, clearly today is only our first full day on site, but we do know that in the area, you know, there have been some successful intersections. Certainly for gold, you've got Prodigy Gold working next door. In terms of the potential for pegmatites, on our initial drive through and drive across site, we've certainly seen some interesting intrusive geology, which we believe is pegmatitic at this stage. However, obviously we've got to do further work to really understand the mineralogy of it. But again, that's something that we'll be doing over the course of the remaining days on the project on this trip, and then which will be followed up by much more targeted, wider spaced soil sampling and rock chip sampling at a later date.
Now, the Northern Territories are known as a prolific Tier 1 mining location with many operators, and indeed some of the deposits in close proximity to Selta. Have you been able to make any speak with any of the neighbours whilst in the country?
So, you look, as far as I'm concerned, it's always good to speak to people who are already operating in an area. You know, they've got data. If they're prepared to share it, it can only be beneficial. So when we got to Alice Springs earlier this week, one of our first stops was the Northern Territory Geological Survey. And that was really just to swing by, say hello, let them know that we're working it, well, we will be working in the area, and just to make some initial acquaintances there. That's actually going to be followed up with a visit to the head office in Darwin later in this week, where we're going to have a broader conversation about tenements and just about who's who in the zoo in the area. But obviously, as we've alluded to in previous announcements, you know, we do border companies who are actively exploring, people like Megawatt, and you know, we've got the start of a burgeoning relationship with those guys. And actually later today, we're going to be swinging by Nolan's, Arafora's Nolan's Bore on the way back to Alice Springs, just to introduce ourselves and say hello.
Well, Tristan Pottas, the CEO of First Development Resources, I'm sure those following FDR are looking forward to more from you. Where to next? And if possible, let's talk again from site.
Absolutely. So obviously it's a bit of a magical mystery tour we're doing at the minute, but I can tell you now it's fantastic to be out in country, to be on the ground, to actually see the projects, to meet the team, and just really get a sense as to what we're up against from a project perspective. And so far, it's been a really positive trip. And following the Selta visit, as I mentioned earlier, we're heading to Darwin, and then it's back to Perth, then up to Port Hedland, and heading out to Wallal, Ripon Hills, and Braeside West. And it'd be great to catch up from that location. So thanks very much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you, Tristan.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programmes at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.